Now on Chronicle.
Once you're in the ground, you don't get a second chance.
A killer epidemic.
It stole my identity. It stole who I was.
It's Russian roulette.
The war on drugs takes a new turn.
You can go to the doctor for anything and get a prescription of pain pills.
With deadly consequences.
She said, "You can't come rescue me anymore."
A crisis in our neighborhoods.
The cartels and the drug dealers have basically staked their claim.
And a fight in the streets.
That quantity you won't ever see the streets.
The meth was a drug. It was bondage. It was slavery for me. And it's not just lower class people who are struggling with it.
Literally, you're living hell on earth if you are addicted to something like this.
Now on Chronicle, State of Addiction.
Welcome to Chronicle. I'm Jane Robelo. The state of addiction is ravaging our communities. It's a national crisis, with more than 90 Americans dying each day from opioid overdoses. The numbers are devastating. In Greenville County last year, 226 people died from drug overdoses. That is the most in any South Carolina county, and more than the overdose deaths in Spartanburg and Anderson counties combined. In Buncombe County, North Carolina, nearly 100 people died. Most of these overdoses are linked to opioids and increasingly a synthetic drug called fentanyl. How did this happen? Why are so many Americans tangled up in some of the most dangerous drugs known to man? Carol Goldsmith now with the drug crisis.
I know people that have had every one of their top teeth pulled out because they get 25 Lortabs every time they get one pulled.
The scary part is, and to this day, I don't know what was in my head, but literally I was getting high again immediately after I got out of the hospital.
Over 2 million Americans battle addiction to prescription opioids. Nearly 500,000 addicted to heroin.
Everybody should care about this because it's coming to your neighborhood. This isn't the type of thing that we can ignore.
Opioids have been around for thousands of years, made from the opium poppy plant. During the American Civil War, fields like this in the Carolinas and Georgia would be plowed up and planted with thousands of poppy plants to offer pain relief for injured soldiers. But in recent years, opioids, both prescription and street drugs, have caused an epidemic of death. And synthetic opioids get even more dangerous. Just a few grains of fentanyl can kill. Carfentanil was developed as an elephant tranquilizer.
There are more people dying of overdose drug deaths now related to heroin and opiates than there are car wrecks, that die in car wrecks in the U.S. So yeah, it's an epidemic, without a doubt.
Last year, Greenville addiction specialist Rich Jones talked to us about the drug problem in our area. He believes it's gotten worse since, the target of drug dealers.
There are certain markets that they'll try to get into. One of the issues we have here in Greenville is it's the 4th fastest growing city in the nation. And so maybe we were a little bit too small for a while, but we're going to be on the radar.
Street drugs pick up where prescription drugs leave off. The National Institute on Drug Abuse says opioids are widespread. In 2015, about 1 in 3 American adults used the powerful painkillers. More than 11 million said they took them without doctor's orders or got them from family and friends. In just 1 year, nearly 638,000 prescriptions for opioids and tranquilizers were written in Greenville County alone. It's an attempt to relieve pain. The pressure has been on to treat pain as a disease and perhaps not as a symptom.
As a primary care physician, I'm embarrassed to say that primary care physicians prescribe half of all opioids in the country. And we got into this problem through a naive assumption that the medicines were not going to lead to addiction and that the medicines were safe.
Many say that thought started in 1980 with an 11-line letter printed in the New England Journal of Medicine. It said in part that less than 1% of patients treated with opioids became addicted. Pain specialists and at least one drug company began using that statistic in marketing, even though it was just a letter and not a full study. And the reality?
People whose first opioid prescription was for more than 5 days were much more likely to still be on opioids a year or 3 years later.
Kevin knows an injury led to prescribed pain meds for 4 years. He says talking with his doctors didn't help.
I started realizing that there's a problem, something's wrong. I knew I'd become dependent on them. And when I mentioned that to them, they completely cut me off and I was not allowed to come back.
So, addicted, Kevin turned to the street, where drugs like heroin were cheaper and more powerful than the prescription medications. He lost everything.
I swore I would never stick a needle in my arm, and then I found that I couldn't take the needle out of my arm.
Now, with a full-blown national opioid crisis, stories like Kevin's are being heard.
Realize that that first prescription could be the beginning of the end for an unfortunate patient and their family.
Here's one more indication of how pervasive opioids have become. According to Health and Human Services, on an average day in this country, more than 650,000 opioid prescriptions are dispensed. Drug cartels are well aware of America's taste for opioids. Heroin, which is cheap, is being smuggled over the border from Mexico in record amounts. And Interstate 85 in the upstate is a major pipeline. Tim Waller has that story.
It's always been a popular fishing hole for police agencies.
Are all these pills yours?
Fighting the war on drugs.
Greenville Tango 11056.
Interstate 85 between Charlotte and Atlanta is where a routine traffic stop can become much more.
K9 alerted, they have a walk up here and look, they got a pound of, we believe, marijuana and a firearm.
But what Lieutenant Chris Hines and his highway interdiction team are starting to find on this drug-infested highway is a class of drugs that is so dangerous.
You know, you're looking at a substance that you take one time, you die.
Sheriff Will Lewis is sounding the alarm.
It's not quite as articulate as a word as I would like to use, but it's stupid. It's just stupid. It makes no sense. You would take something that would kill you immediately. That just doesn't make any sense to me.
He's talking about the recent seizure in Greenville County of not one, but 2 large quantities of gray death, which is a mixture of heroin, fentanyl, and carfentanil, a drug so strong just touching it can kill you.
You know, God forbid you pop a bag open on the side of the road, on the side of I-85, and you don't know what it is, or you drop a bag getting it out of a car, and it pops on the side of the road. You've got to shut down I-85 at that point.
But that, he says, is just the tip of the iceberg on what deputies have found on the interstate just this year. They've also seized 19 pounds of heroin and nearly 3 pounds of methamphetamine.
This year we were very successful in getting a lot of drugs and a lot of money and a lot of bad guys off of our streets.
And in Spartanburg County, this year's Operation Rolling Thunder raked in 11 pounds of heroin and 18 pounds of cocaine, all in the span of 1 week.
Heroin right now on our streets are selling anywhere from $150 to $200 a gram.
What isn't known is whether drugs seized in operations like this one were bound for the upstate, or if they were just passing through.
Sometimes there are markings on packages. Sometimes we kind of know it's coming through, you know, either surveillance or through, you know, something that we're doing, investigative techniques, word on the street, whatever. You know, and we kind of got an idea, but Greenville didn't dry up much after we got 17.5 pounds off the interstate. So it's coming in from somewhere else too.
Tango 11056.
Wherever these drugs are coming from, or whichever city or town they're headed,
if you are addicted to something like this and you continue with that addiction, you're living a hell on this planet.
85 southbound.
They're rolling through the upstate each and every day, fueling the state of addiction.
Atlanta, to the south of us, is now considered a primary distribution hub for heroin by the DEA. Officials say that's led to an increase in opioid trafficking in our area. Well, they're the smallest, most vulnerable victims of addiction. The Centers for Disease Control says the number of babies born addicted to opioids has tripled over the past 15 years. But the problem is likely much worse because these cases are underreported. Carol Goldsmith on what's being done to help the youngest victims.
Christy has spent nearly half of her 33 years addicted to drugs.
Once you get to a certain level, you can't get no higher, and you just keep wanting to get higher and higher and higher. So then from there, I went, recently in the last 7 months, I went to heroin. And that's when I knew it was a really big problem.
Bigger than she knew. A month into her heroin use, she found out she was pregnant.
Yeah, that's a big concern. That's why I'm so ready for May to get here so I'll know.
It's a big concern for doctors, too, like Vanderbilt Medical Center's Stephen Patrick, a neonatologist.
For me, it began in the neonatal intensive care unit where I work. We began seeing more infants having drug withdrawal in our unit and wondered if what we were seeing in our unit was happening everywhere throughout the country.
It was. And it's called neonatal abstinence syndrome, a cluster of problems caused by exposure to opioids in the womb. The National Institute on Drug Abuse says every 25 minutes in this country, a baby is born suffering from opioid withdrawal. So Patrick and his colleagues came up with guidelines for helping these babies immediately after birth.
One of the things that we've done is to keep mom and baby together, and that really does promote bonding. We've seen reductions in the total length of hospital stay.
At the Prescription Drug and Heroin Summit in Atlanta, Patrick offered other guidelines to help these women and children. First, carefully taper off with opioids like methadone. Be in touch with child welfare services to keep these families together, and create programs to help these women.
There you go, let's do this.
Programs like this, Serenity Place. It's a residential treatment center for moms and their children. Serenity Place gives priority to pregnant addicts like Christy, who otherwise would end up in jail. For Christy, who already has a 13-year-old son who doesn't live with her, it also gives her the chance to one day have her whole family together.
I just want to be a parent again. I haven't been one in so long. With my son, I've been there, but I haven't. Been there physically, but nothing else, not mentally, emotionally, or anything. And that's mainly what I want, is to be a parent again.
Christy gave birth to a healthy baby boy named Noah at the end of May. She's completed the first step of the recovery program at Serenity Place. Treatment there is intense and includes learning parenting skills. Serenity Place can take 16 women with up to 2 children each. A woman and her children can stay typically for up to 6 months.
A personal crusade born from a mother's heartbreak.
She said, "You can't come rescue me anymore."
And a life stolen.
But her brain was just hijacked by addiction.
A family finds peace by offering hope to others. Coming up next on Chronicle.
The loss of a child is the most devastating experience for a parent. When one upstate mother lost her daughter to an overdose, she knew she had to do something. So she put her pain on paper, using her daughter's obituary to try to save lives. Here is Myra Ruiz with a parent's warning.
Reagan was the life of the party. She'd go above and beyond. She was just very bubbly, laughing person.
When Reagan Berry died on May 16th, other images filled her mother's mind.
I mean, I really never knew much about heroin until this. It's a horrible, horrible drug. She'd learned to manage the amount just enough, to keep the withdrawals away, but to keep us from being suspicious. After, a while, I could tell her cycles.
Jennifer Woodard had open conversations with Reagan about heroin.
I sat down and I said, "Explain to me what it does to you. I mean, what do you get from it?" And she just says, it's just, you get this warm, fuzzy feeling. And she said, it's just like I could conquer the world.
After the 22-year-old lost her battle with addiction, her mom went to work on the obituary.
I wanted people, when they read this one, that they would stop and think. And they would be like, wow,
And one didn't have to read hard between the lines to learn how addiction robbed Reagan's ability to make good decisions. She stole from family and friends, crashed her mom's car, performed sex acts for drugs, and nearly died from a previous overdose. Shortly before the one that killed her, Reagan said this to her mom.
She said, "You can't come rescue me anymore."
But through these words, Jennifer is helping others rescue their own loved ones.
I've had 2 moms call me whose sons were recovering addicts, and he checked himself into rehab.
A broken heart bringing hope to others.
People who've lost loved ones to addiction often ask, could I have done more to help them? Tim Waller looks at the heartbreak that heroin leaves behind.
Anyone that knew him can tell you he just lit up the room immediately. He just had the best personality and could always make anybody laugh.
Every now and then, Miranda Gilbert has to remind herself the man she loves is no longer here.
Like sometimes I have to actually just say it to myself and remind myself that it's true because it doesn't feel like it.
Especially given the fact that her fiancé died from a heroin overdose, a short time after sending her this sweet video. As far as the heroin goes, Gilbert didn't learn her fiancé, Zachary, had been using it until he came out of rehab. a month before his death.
It was a relief in a sense because he admitted it, but then also like another huge, weight on my chest because it was worse than I knew.
But the worst was yet to come. On November 16th, Gilbert got a call from Zachary's brother. He had overdosed on heroin again, and paramedics couldn't bring him back.
Why didn't I stay with him longer Friday night? Or why didn't I, call his mom earlier when he didn't text me fast enough?
The second guessing began. Could Gilbert have done more to prevent this from happening? And if so, what?
A lot of people that, that were in this situation probably would have left him before I did. But, I loved him and I knew he could get better and I wanted him to get better.
In the end, she realized she did everything she could and is still helping by sharing this tragedy with others.
Replacing shame with hope. That's the mission of one couple in Western North Carolina. These parents have experienced the pain themselves. Here is Myra Ruiz.
On March 6, 2010, an accidental prescription drug overdose took the life of 20-year-old Anna Honeycutt.
To see your daughter lying there, she was peaceful, but she had already passed away by the time we got there.
Don and I knew that when Anna died, we weren't ashamed of her. We felt like she was just as brilliant and talented as our other children, but her brain was just hijacked by addiction.
Julie and Don Honeycutt say as a child, Anna seemed to be the happiest of their 4 kids.
And she loved everybody, but she was very hypersensitive.
What began with drinking led to drug use and sent Anna in and out of rehab since the age of 18. She was the only one of her 4 siblings to struggle with addiction.
Yeah, I've always wondered about addiction as a disease and what kind of genetic predisposition is there for those who are in families with no addiction known in their past. And what is the key that turns that on?
By asking that question and viewing addiction as a disease, the Honeycutts say more families would be willing to step forward and ask for help.
People need support. We need recovery community. We need support for families.
The Honeycutt started Anna's Hope, which funds drug abuse prevention efforts and support services. And they also work with Hope RX, which focuses on education, prevention, and treatment. Through both efforts, they're encouraging families to change the way they think about addiction.
I can't tell you how many families and parents I have started out with who are angry at their child, who can't believe their children are doing this to them. And it has to be a whole shift in their thinking that the child isn't intentionally doing it to them.
The Honeycutts say taking the shame out of asking for help will lead to earlier intervention.
You can't predict what's going to happen with addiction.
Offering hope to others in the wake of their own tragedy.
Drawing a new battle line in the war on addiction.
And when I turned to a doctor and told him that, hey, my body's liking these, he took me off of everything.
The push to educate the prescribers when Chronicle continues.
Almost 4% of adolescents abuse prescription pills. Brennan McDavid visited the White Horse Academy, a residential treatment center for boys, to find out why children are especially susceptible to drugs.
We have 16 young men here at any given time.
It's a growing problem. Kids becoming addicted to opiates.
It's not uncommon for us to ask, at what age did you first use a substance? And for the answer to be single digits. They began at 8 or 9.
Residential manager James Campbell says adolescents who grow up in a single-parent home or have a history in juvenile court are more susceptible to abuse. But there are also some biological factors.
Their dopamine receptors are a little less reactive,
causing them to feel depressed or bored.
Well, unfortunately, that makes them a little more inclined to take risks. That can be a good thing if that risk is to try out for a football team, but it also can be a bad thing in that they are more likely to try a substance of some sort.
And stay hooked. Campbell says it only takes one prescription to jumpstart an addiction.
We've had young people come through services who had a sports injury, they were playing football, hurt an ankle, and so ended up with some pain medications after that.
The same goes for wisdom teeth surgery. His advice to parents?
To be the gatekeeper for that medication, to not just hand a young person a bottle with 30 Loratab or 30 OxyContin in it.
Unlike adults, Campbell says most adolescents haven't developed coping skills.
One of the things that we're doing with them is giving them some new skills, new tools in their tool belt, and an opportunity to practice using those in a safe environment.
Starting treatment early and growing successful young men.
Whitehorse Academy is part of the Phoenix Center, which also offers prevention and outpatient services for adolescents. A key part in fighting this epidemic is educating those who write the prescriptions and those who use them. According to the CDC, the number of opioid prescriptions sold has more than quadrupled since 1999. Here's Carol Goldsmith on the drive to educate.
Life is dishing up something sweet for Brian these days. A management job and a chance at life free of addiction. Car accidents and a back injury started the painkillers when he was a teenager.
And when I turned to a doctor and told him that, hey, my body's liking these, he took me off of everything. He said by law he was scared that, he's keeping my addiction going, so he stopped. I went in through massive withdrawal. And then I went to a buddy of mine who said, hey, I can get these from a guy down the road. And these turned into multiple prescriptions, doctor shopping, heroin, just the full spectrum.
In the face of more stories like Brian's, the Centers for Disease Control published guidelines for doctors on prescribing opioids. Among the highlights, opioids should not be the first line of treatment. Discuss the benefits and risks of opioids with patients. Use no more than needed, and reevaluate the pain in 4 weeks.
The guidelines came out in March of 2016, but at the recent Prescription Drug and Heroin Summit in Atlanta, the CDC rolled out more resources for doctors to talk to their patients about opioids.
So which one would most people choose?
Including interactive simulations of patients and doctors talking about pain and remedies.
We know that state medical societies are offering more and more courses. So that is a critical piece of this, and physicians are enhancing their education and training.
And there's education enough for everyone on pills, on detox, on recovery.
I always said that before I got into recovery that, AA and NA is for quitters. No, it's for the people that want to survive, the people that want to thrive and stop just doing the day-to-day of that wretched life.
Instead, choosing a new, full, sweet life.
The emotional and physical anguish of pain.
I would, raid the medicine cabinet and find whatever pills I could happen to find that did something.
Coming up next on Chronicle, finding a drug-free antidote.
Adults with mental disorders receive half of all opioid prescriptions. That's according to the Journal of the American Board of Family Medicine. Researchers say the results are troubling and that doctors should look at a patient's psychological history before writing a prescription. Brennan McDavid has the story.
Dr. David Ellis, Chief Medical Officer at Party Hospital, says identifying pain and the appropriate treatment can be tricky.
You can't measure that. It's not high blood pressure, it's not your pulse.
Creating a two-part problem where doctors are overprescribing narcotics and patients expecting them. Chief of Pain Medicine Dr. Edward Lewis says there are different factors that put a patient at risk of getting hooked on opioids, one of which is mental illness.
They create euphoria, they create sedation and a sense of relaxation, so patients will experience that and oftentimes say, well, I'm better.
But that doesn't stop doctors from signing on the dotted line.
This is a patient population where there's clearly more of a problem than in other patient populations.
And a population that deserves attention, not a quick fix.
And maybe oxycodone or hydrocodone is not the right medication for you.
Alternative therapies are incredibly important in trying to treat these patients. I think too long in the United States we've been relying on simply one treatment, and that's opioids.
Alternative treatments like acupuncture, meditation, and physical therapy in which doctors can treat pain without risking addiction.
One of those alternative treatments, acupuncture, has been around for centuries. As Carol Goldsmith reports, the ancient practice is helping many find the road to recovery.
Barbara Bell is calm and relaxed now, but a little over a year ago, she was hooked on prescription medication.
I would, raid the medicine cabinet and find whatever pills I could happen to find that did something. Most of what I did was to numb the pain or numb my day.
I had a miscarriage it's almost 6 years ago now. It took me a month to get off my couch. And even after that, I couldn't cope. I never really truly grieved.
What Barbara found to help with the physical pain of addiction and her anguish was acupuncture.
So what acupuncture does is it basically recruits the internal resources of the person that's already there and helps stimulate that sense of calm, that sense of relaxation that we tried to find by using addictive substances.
There is no agreement on just how exactly acupuncture works, but there are several theories. One has it that needles inserted into certain pathways on the body stimulates the nerve, which sends a signal to the brain, which in turn releases neural hormones such as endorphins, which help relieve pain and give a sense of well-being. Alternative methods of pain relief were part of the conversation at the recent Prescription Drug and Heroin Summit in Atlanta.
The evidence is clear that there are non-pharmacologic alternatives that work well with pain. We just have to make sure they are as available and accessible to our patients as the medications, the opioids.
Very effective.
And among the exhibitors at the summit, a registered nurse fully accredited as an acupuncturist giving demonstrations.
The same protocol helps with chronic pain. Acupuncture helps with a number of things. Nothing relieves pain faster than acupuncture, and probably nothing relieves the addiction problems better than acupuncture.
For acupuncture practitioner and drug counselor Terrell Rogers, it's been a key part of the addiction recovery toolbox.
It's beautiful what the guys say is that this is what they've been craving. It cuts cravings, especially for the new guy that's in recovery, really quiets the system.
All Barbara Bell knows is that it helps.
It's made a world of difference.
Critics of acupuncture argue that more studies are needed before they can support acupuncture as a treatment for drug addiction. But those we talk to who use acupuncture say it helps without side effects.
A crackdown on opioids leads to another kind of pain.
I have no life without these medications. Just absolutely no life.
And a woman uses her own past.
I went from having everything perfect in my life to absolutely having nothing.
To keep others on the right path when Chronicle continues.
Feel victimized by the new crackdown on opioids. They say they need the prescriptions for chronic pain relief. Allie Miles has the story.
Multiple prescriptions, various times a day, every single day.
Yeah, I have no life without these medications. Just absolutely no life.
A lifelong commitment Donnell Gonzalez despises.
I haven't been out of pain since 2008.
That's when Donnell's epidural went wrong, going too far into her spinal cord, causing arachnoiditis.
A misplaced epidural, you're talking millimeters, causes this immense pain and this problem for life.
My nerves are basically all gummed up and scarred inside of my spinal cord. So that causes a lot of nerve damage and intractable, nonstop pain.
Now the CDC is cracking down on opioid prescriptions, enforcing regulations.
It's already difficult to go to pain management, do drug testing. You have to go every month.
She says pharmacies, insurance companies, doctors, they're all afraid to prescribe opioids. They're asked to regulate or limit pills people have taken for years.
One medication alone that she takes without insurance would cost us over $1,000 a month.
And the abusers? Donnell says those people aren't getting those pills legally.
When laws are put into place, it affects the legal patients. It's not affecting the abusers.
She says the CDC's stricter regulations only make it harder for families like hers to live, for people like her to manage their pain.
We'd like to have our voice heard. We're totally being excluded from the equation.
An upstate woman in and out of jail for years is going back, but this time she's on the other side of the bars, helping inmates who find themselves in circumstances she knows well. Here's Mandy Gaither with her story.
It tells my struggles in my life through the disease of addiction.
She wears her story on her arm, literally, each day reliving the past from the top when she graduated from nursing school to the deepest bottom, an addict who couldn't stay out of the Anderson County Jail.
One of my favorite tattoos, and this actually represents when I died and almost overdosed. And this was happy little me back then.
Julie Burleson has been clean now for 6 years, but moving on meant looking back. In a span of 2 years, the 39-year-old was in jail at least 9 times. Drug charges stemming from her addiction, which started when she was prescribed pain medication and couldn't stop taking it.
And I got to the point where doctors were not prescribing me medication anymore. So I took it upon myself to use my nursing license to obtain my prescriptions from a pharmacy.
That's how she was first arrested in 2008. She tried outpatient treatment, drug court. Nothing broke the cycle until she spent 45 days in jail and had one option left, going into treatment.
I threw away a lot. I lost my nursing license for a period of time. I lost my house. I lost a car. I lost my children. I lost a marriage. I lost everything. I went from having everything perfect in my life to absolutely having nothing.
When you hit rock bottom, there's a choice. Stay where you are or fight your way back. While Julie's back in nursing now, her battle brought her back to jail on the other side of the bars, telling her story to inmates.
When I sit down and tell them where I was, and they look at me now, they don't believe that I was once in an orange jumpsuit sitting at Anderson County Detention Center.
She may not be proud of her past.
Yeah, I have lots of conversations about my arm and my tattoos, and it reminds me of where I was, and it's the perfect little story all wrapped up in one little arm.
But it's a part of her. She's hoping the bad chapter leads to a happy ending.
A powerful ally in the fight for survival.
But literally, if it wasn't for that drug, I wouldn't be here right now.
Coming up next on Chronicle.
More than 500,000 people died from drug overdoses between 2000 and 2015. That's according to the Centers for Disease Control. And many more would have died if it weren't for another drug called naloxone. Here's Carol Goldsmith with this overdose lifeline.
The caffeine in coffee is as close as Matt gets to any kind of drug these days.
That's really hot.
Hard drugs almost killed him, but with naloxone, he came back.
Basically, my younger sister had to find her brother dead. And I think if she hadn't woken up at that particular time, paramedics happened to be close, whatever the case was. But literally, if it wasn't for that drug, I wouldn't be here right now.
Naloxone works by attaching to opioid receptors in the brain. And since it attaches better than most opioids, naloxone crowds them out. By doing so, it reverses an overdose. A handful of companies produce naloxone in an auto-injector form, in a solution that can be injected, and in a nasal spray.
Because naloxone is such a lifesaver, major pharmaceutical chains like CVS and Walgreens are offering it over the counter in many states. It gets into the system fast through the mucous membranes. And if you don't have opioids on board, it won't affect you at all.
At the recent Prescription Drug and Heroin Summit in Atlanta, naloxone was a key part of the discussion.
And the AMA is encouraging physicians to consider co-prescribing naloxone to those patients that they think are at high risk of overdose.
Right now, the Narcan one-dose spray is one of the least expensive options.
We were going to be transparent with our price. We've maintained our transparency and we've never raised our price. It's $37.50 a dose.
That's for 4 milligrams, twice the old dosage, reflecting the danger and power of newer synthetic drugs.
Narcan, most first responders and EMTs and police officers are carrying it because as much as to save a citizen, it's also to save an officer or a fireman or somebody that could be potentially exposed.
Even canine officers have been brought back after being exposed on the job, all thanks to a drug designed to bring surgery patients out of anesthesia.
That drug enabled me to survive and get to a place where I could get help.
Part of the reason for the opioid crisis is a well-intentioned effort by doctors to help relieve pain. Many say doctors should now be at the forefront of combating the epidemic, and an upstate medical school agrees. The USC School of Medicine in Greenville has started a unique program, an eye-opener for up-and-coming doctors. Carol Goldsmith has the story.
Here's Ben Sullivan today. This was Ben just 18 months ago.
I had acute pancreatitis that was the result of about a decade of alcohol abuse. It was the most debilitating pain I've ever felt.
After 6 weeks of recovery, Ben made his way to Favor, Faces and Voices of Recovery, to get help with his addiction.
it'll start changing the culture.
The USC School of Medicine Greenville wants to see the addiction recovery begin the minute a patient sees a doctor.
Because clearly, like everybody else just sees that and kind of immediately judges that.
It's begun an elective class for medical students, teaching them to be recovery coaches as well as doctors.
With the goal to continue for the next 2 years to help out and volunteer, to do what we can to kind of take responsibility for our patients and promote this cause and help respond to the opiate epidemic that we've heard so much about.
Rich Jones of Favor helped develop the Recovery Coach program for the medical school.
Part of our training is how do you talk to somebody with this issue. There's a discipline or an approach called motivational interviewing, and it's consistent with a lot of work that's being done at the med school.
You heard about communication, motivational interviewing.
And this year at the Prescription Drug and Heroin Summit in Atlanta, the CDC unveiled a new interactive program to help doctors learn this technique.
What we're doing in each of the modules, you will have the opportunity to practice communication with a patient.
Through these scenarios, doctors are encouraged to ask a patient an open-ended question
that will encourage the patient to open up and share more.
And through that sharing, it's hoped students like Jean-Marc will become better doctors. They also learn about addiction, recovery resources, how to treat young people, and train doctors to get patients into treatment faster.
One who could tell me what kind of resources were out there in the community so that when I got out, I had a place to turn to.
The idea of getting doctors more connected with their patients is part of the philosophy at the medical school here. The recovery coaching program is believed to be one of the first of its kind in the country, but it's not the only outreach. Medical students are also required to become EMTs, emergency medical technicians.
By doing that, they learn a lot about what patients are going through at home. So they learn where the patients come from.
I've noticed that with parents, whenever a physician becomes involved and they say something about the child, like, hey, something's going on here, that's why I'm so excited about the med school partnership. That's why I think it's transformational, and it is the only place in the country doing this.
Giving new meaning to the idea of continuing care.
When Chronicle continues,
it was miserable. I was miserable, you know, and yet I'm chasing after this high.
How the power of faith.
I've seen people climb out of that hole and live successful lives.
Is creating a community of hope.
Just how bad the addiction problem in our area has become, it's an upstate pastor who found himself smack dab in the middle of a drug crisis. But instead of turning a blind eye, the pastor did the unthinkable. As Tim Waller reports, he gave drug-addicted people in his community a crossroads to better living.
Well, good morning, friends.
On a Sunday morning,
welcome to this gathering of Slater Baptist Church
in the former mill village of Slater in northern Greenville County.
We exist to glorify God and worship.
70 worshipers pack Slater Baptist Church. More than 5 times the number than when Pastor Scott Cato first started.
Was it on my radar to be in Slater? No, definitely not. I'm not sure how many people's radar it's on.
Cato says he knew he wanted to serve in a rural community where there were challenges. But it wasn't until he and a handful of church members went door to door that Cato learned what people in Slater wanted.
And every single group that went out, when they asked that question, they heard addiction ministry, something for people who are wrestling with addiction, and particularly younger families with children.
That's what Slater Baptist Church began to offer.
In what situations do you feel alone or misunderstood?
All of the people at this Crossroads class have battled serious addictions and agreed to appear on camera for Chronicle.
Just kidding, Mom.
Steve Cochran was addicted to pharmaceutical opioids, which he says nearly destroyed his life.
And it was miserable. I was miserable, you know, and yet I'm chasing after this high, and I just continue taking pills, and then I would drink with the pills and everything else, trying to achieve some sort of feeling inside of my soul that made me feel okay, and I just chased it forever, and I never got it. And I finally realized that I never would.
For Cochran, it wasn't an addiction problem. He had a worship problem, as he describes it.
Can you get to the point where you're not having to do this? Yeah, I think so.
He says addiction ministry filled that void.
It's got insane hooks. Like once you try it, you're hooked.
As it did for Mila Cervantes, a former meth addict who now teaches the women's group.
I've seen people climb out of that hole and live successful lives and just be normal people, allowed to live life the way that God really wants them to be able to live, and to lean on more people and build friendships and relationships.
That's really what you're going for.
What they don't offer here is addiction recovery. Those who attend Crossroads are already clean, but need the support of people who understand.
And the answer is community, being able to come in and talk through that stuff together with other people who have faced the same sorts of struggles so that you can just walk through life together. That's the value of community.
It's a community that many in Slater say is nothing short of a miracle.
You're a blessing, man. Thank you.
Crossroads meets every Wednesday night from 7 until 9. Free coffee and childcare are provided in what the pastor calls a judgment-free atmosphere. Well, pain is a very complex problem. It's hard to measure, and we're not sure what goes on in the nervous system that leads to it. About 1/3 of all Americans report some form of pain. But now the door has been opened to give them relief without the fear of addiction and death. Here again is Carol Goldsmith with the future of pain relief.
Kevin's road to addiction began with pain from an injury.
I was just in pain, and my doctor told me to take this, and that's what I did.
4 years later, cut off from the prescriptions, he moved to street drugs.
The physical withdrawal is so strong that you have to have something. You're just so, so ill. So, that opened the door to other cocaine and crack.
This year's Prescription Drug and Heroin Summit in Atlanta was created to open the door to a pain and addiction-free future.
And that's what we're all here to talk about. And not just talk, but to take actions.
One of the most hopeful projects is trying to develop an opioid pain reliever that is not addictive. When opioids are taken, they bind to a receptor. That's how they work.
Well, it turns out the receptor has two paths, like the two lanes on this child's racetrack. One path, one lane, leads to pain relief. The other track, though, well, that leads to addiction. So the goal is to close the path that leads to addiction and just get pain relief.
You would have a very effective pain medicine without the addiction potential, and it would still be an opioid.
In the meantime, researchers continue to search for non-drug ways of dealing with pain.
We try to figure out how to manipulate the nervous system with an electrical signal instead of a drug to create a beneficial outcome, which is a new and promising area.
A version of that therapy already exists with TENS, or transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation.
So I'm actually going to hook these pads directly up to your shoulders. You can put these anywhere in the body that you want. Now what this is going to do is send an electromagnetic impulse into the nerves to cause the muscles to contract and release. At the same time, it stimulates endorphin releases that alleviate pain.
My shoulder was hurting. It feels a lot better.
On most units, there's a choice of therapy, and the patient controls intensity.
Better cognitive.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
For many, the TENS units are helpful. Also helpful, physical therapy, nutrition, exercise, non-addictive medications, non-addictive therapeutic options.
A major effort is needed if we're going to do that to really understand the neurobiology of pain. We still don't completely know what goes on in the nervous system in a pain experience, depending on what kind of pain experience it is.
Kevin has experienced pain, physical and emotional. A year out from his addiction, he relies on a residential Greenville rehab program and his service dog.
And he loved me back, unconditionally, and it started giving me a glimmer of hope that, through this program and the process and what it's allowed me to do has made me somebody incredible today that, my own family's like, wow, who are you?
For Kevin, love is also part of the ultimate pain relief.
Recently, after a year of residential treatment in Greenville, Kevin returned home to Florida. He hopes to work with others who want to recover from drug addiction. Throughout this hour, we've seen the anguish of drug addiction, families ripped apart and broken, lives lost, and a pain that never dulls. But we've also seen stories of hope and recovery. It's up to all of us to work together as a community to stem the tide of drug abuse in our neighborhoods and schools. This is a long road, and we each have to find our role in fighting this crisis. Thank you for joining us for Chronicle, State of Addiction. I'm Jane Robelo. Good night.